Hello. I'm going to share the story of how I found my mother's half sister. So I'm going to go back to when I was a young girl, probably about 8 or 9. I found out through my mother that she has a half sister, and she's actually younger than I am by 14 months. And um, I asked my mother about her, but she didn't know much about her except for that the last time that she had seen her is when um, her grandfather, who would be my great grandfather, that she shared with, that my mother and I shared with her sister's, her sister. Um, Her sister's name is Davina, and yes, I have permission to use her name. But so the last time apparently that she saw her was when her grandfather died, and she was at the funeral, and my mother's sister was there. So over the years, I've always wondered about her. And as I got older, I tried to figure out how I could find her. And this was before everybody had computers and cell phones. So every now and then I tried to look for her, um, and I wasn't having any luck. And then as the internet became more common, I would look online and still was not finding anything. The only thing I knew was that she was named Davina, and I knew her last name, and I knew her birth month and year, and where she was born. So um, every now and then I would look for her. My mother, I think, kind of gave up after as time went on. So back in 2014, um, I heard she just came to mind, and I thought I'm going to try to look her up again. And I put in her first name, her last name that I knew she was born with, and her month and the year that she was born in the city, and a her name, which had a different last name, but it also had her birth surname. Um, and there was an email that showed up, and so on there, and it on the it was like people search or something like that. It also showed that she was born in April in her year. So I emailed, um, I sent an email to that email address, and I got a response right away. And um, so I emailed her back. And so the first email actually I told her, I believe I told her who I was, and I had been searching for my mother's half sister. And I shared when she was born and her name, and I shared the name of their father, who would be my grandfather. And she emailed me back and she said, yes, my father's name is so and so. And she included some other information. It's been a while, so I can't remember all the information, but I emailed her back, um, and I said, well, I believe that you are my mother's sister. But she emailed me back. She said, I do know that I have a half sister, and I knew her name. Uh, I knew her first name, but I didn't know her last name. So anyway, we emailed back and forth, and I within a month planned a trip to go. Um, I was living out of state at the time, and so I planned a trip with my kids and I to go down to Florida to meet my newfound half aunt. Now, some of you have heard my story about how I found an aunt 4 years ago, but that's on my biological father's side. This aunt is on my mother's side. She's my mother's half sister. So anyway, her name is Davina. Just I know I mentioned it before, but so um, I started driving to Florida, and after the first day, so it usually took 2 days from between Illinois and Florida. So on the second day, I thought I better call my mother and tell her that I was on my way down, and I did not tell her what I was doing because Davina and I had planned on doing a surprise reunion. So when I called my mother, she was kind of surprised and she said, "Well, um, you're going to see me with black eyes because I just had eye surgery." And I was like, "That's okay." So I was a little worried about how Davina would respond seeing my mother with black eyes, but I told Davina about it. So I get to Florida, and it's like within a day or two, my mother had an appointment uh, nearby where my kids and I were staying at my mother in law's house. And so we arranged for Davina to come over, and I called my cousins that were also in the area, and they brought their mother. And by the way, those cousins had no idea that Davina existed. All these years, I thought they knew about her. So their father apparently had not told them about Davina. So Davina comes over, and then we waited for around, and my cousins were able to meet her, and we got to know her a little bit. And then my mother, um, she pulled up, and so Davina went and hid in one of the bedrooms. And so mother comes in, she gets settled, and um, I just started asking her questions like, "Mother, have you, um, looked for your sister lately?" And um, and I do remember she said, "No, I kind of gave up after seeing the obituary of my father," which, as an aside, I will share that my mother had not seen her father since I was a baby. So I have no memory of him whatsoever. He estranged from my mother and her family, and um, had a series of women in his life, and then he married Davina's mother, but he also abandoned that family. So none of us knew where he was at until my mother saw his obituary years prior. So anyway, I had found a bunch of pictures in some of my uh, boxes of pictures that of my mother when she was small, and of her brother and her mom and her father. And so I brought those out, and I started asking her questions like, "How old were you here?" Or "When was this taken?" And stuff like that. And then, and actually, that's when I actually finally asked my mother, "Well, you know, have you looked for your sister lately? Do you have any pictures of her?" And that's when mother said no, she kind of gave up. And she did not have pictures of Davina. So I said, "Hold on a second, I gotta go get something." So I went and got Davina, and this was not scripted. I still laugh about it to this day. This happened back in 2014, almost 12 years ago. So Davina comes out, and she like stops, and she looks at my mother, and she says, "So I hear you've been looking for your sister." And my mother kind of popped up and looked, and she said, "Yes." And Davina says, "Well, I'm your sister. I'm Davina." And mother's like, "No, you're not." And Davina says, "Yes, I am." And I got a little worried. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." My mother again said, "No, you're not." And Davina said, "Yes, I am." And I was really getting worried when mother said, "I want proof." She was not like the most pleasant when she said that. And Davina said, "You want proof? I've got proof." She turned around, went back to the bedroom, got her purse, brought it back, or her wallet, and showed mother her ID. And mother kind of looked at it, just like, and she looked up at Davina, and it was like she didn't know what to say. And she got up, and they hugged, and um, so yes, that was an amazing reunion. My first time having my eyes on her, Davina, and I call her my sister aunt because she's 14 months younger than I am, and it's been great having her in my life. I feel like if we had grown up together, we would have gotten in trouble together. We would have been more like sisters than aunt and niece. And um, unfortunately, she doesn't have contact with my mother either because of my mother's husband. But I am glad that I was able to um, find my mother's sister Davina, and that they did have were able to get to know each other for a few years before mother's health started taking a turn. Um, so, but anyway, thanks for listening to that. Bye.